on your far right, is going to be performing some extra works tonight, including music of first appearance on Other Minds of Paganini and Bach. And, to begin, let's talk about Dieter Schnebel, who is a composer from Berlin, and he has composed a piece for Michael Bach to play on this program called Diesen, Händen. And I'd like to ask you, Michael, if you could tell us about the genesis of the piece, because as I understand it, you sent him a poem, or some poems, by Heinrich Böll, and he got the idea to go ahead and write this piece for you based on one of those pieces of poetry.
Yeah, this was in 91 or 2, I guess, 92. I was living in Cologne at that time, and there was a 75th anniversary of Heinrich Böll, une hommage à Böll, in Cologne, and the son of Böll gave me some texts. He wanted that I should ask another composer to write a piece for cello, and he gave me some texts which were not published until that time. And well, Schnebel chose this text mit diesen Händen, which means with these hands. Where Böll, it's a very early text. I wouldn't say it's a piece of great literature, but it's a very short text. It's a text where Heinrich Böll describes what he has done with his hands during the war. And every sentence begins with these hands. And then he describes what he has done. And it's a little bit monotonic, the text, and yes, a little bit, what should I say, moralistic. The first performance was in Cologne, was with William Pearson, a singer, and there goes another part with the cello part, it's for voice. And well, the first piece, the first movement I will play today, the text consists only of these 3 words, with these hands. And later on in the other movements, he adds what he has done with these hands in the text. But the cello piece doesn't give you any idea how he worked with the text, and it really could be played independently from the voice piece. It's usually called Etüden, but obviously he kept the title for this performance, mit diesen Händen.
Now, the cello performing of Michael Bach is unusual because he uses a special bow that he's developed over many, many years that is unlike any bow you've ever seen, and he'll be performing the Schnebel piece with this curved stick and a bow that, well, you describe the bow. Tell me what it does.
Well, it's round. And you can play polyphonously on the instrument.
Which means what?
Yeah, several voices. So you don't have to play 1 or 2 strings. You can play 3 and 4 strings, and to change in between these possibilities. With the lever mechanics, I can change the tension of the hairs and touch every string of the instrument.
So sometimes the bow has strings that are stretched tight, or hairs that are stretched tight, but you can do something,
yeah,
an adjustment of somehow, and they become limp and they just hang.
Yes.
And then when you push them across, they can hit all 4 strings at once, or 3 or 2,
yes,
as you choose. Now, how does this help you in the performing of music of Bach that we're going to hear later?
Well, this is a very big question. We know that Johann Sebastian Bach didn't know the bows we are using nowadays. So these bows, these straight bows, which are concave, my bows are convex, they didn't exist at his time. And but we don't know his bows. That's interesting because when I thought, when I started 18 years ago to develop such a bow, I thought it already exists, and I first looked through whole Europe to find such a bow, and there was no bow. And then I looked for a bow maker, and there was no bow maker who was willing to do such a bow and who had the knowledge to do it. So it took me 17 years to develop these bows I use today.
Now, the bow that you have designed after 17 years, on and off you've been showing it to Rostropovich, and over the years he's helped you with some ideas to develop it. Is this now being manufactured so everybody can buy one?
Yeah, when I started to get involved in that, I had in mind to provide these bows for other cellists and violinists, because there were some violin players which didn't do that. They kept the bows for themselves, and if somebody wanted to play such a bow, he had to invent his own bow. So for me it was important that and this was really a great big deal of work, if I start with that, I should provide it for others. So other cellists are playing these bows in the States, in Europe, in Japan, in the Arabic Emirates, and violin players too. And they all make their own music with it. That's the interesting thing for me, to see what they are doing with the bows.
So there's going to be a whole new repertoire of cello music that will emerge out of this. Can you play that kind of bow on a string bass?
Yes, there's also a bow for bass, yes.
Well, right now this is all very abstract for everybody, but you will get a pretty full demonstration. On the first half of our program, Mr. Bach will open with the work of Dieter Schnebel, and then on the second half, you're going to play something from the Sixth Suite of Bach, and then a piece by Paganini. You're going to explain those at the time when you play them, the Paganini
No, I can do that now.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe. The Paganini pieces came to my knowledge through a violin player who has already 2 curved bows, which I had made for him. And he wrote a book about Paganini and the 12 Capricci, and he showed me some polyphonic pieces of Paganini. These pieces are not known, but they exist. The Österreichische Nationalbibliothek in Vienna has this manuscript I'm playing. There's another one in Genova. There are some scripts in Leipzig, I guess, or Dresden, in Germany.
How are these played, these pieces?
Yeah, Paganini had no curved bow, but what he did was he put the hairs of the bow over the strings and had a stick underneath the violin, so he could play 4 strings at the same time, but only 4 strings. He couldn't change between 4, 3 and 1 string. So the piece originally is from the beginning to the end in 4 voices, and it's notated like a string quartet. But with the cello you can't do that, because the cello is too thick and the bow too short.
Well, all this is fascinating, but we have to let Mr. Bach go backstage now so he can prepare for the opening of the concert. Thank you very much, Mikhail, for
Yeah, you're welcome.
explaining this. All week we've been meeting with the other composers, listening to their work and becoming acquainted with them, and I'm just going to ask Pamerud if you can say what you felt about the cello and Mikhail's performing on it. What did it bring up for you?
Well, I was kind of stunned because I never saw anything like that in my life. So that was totally new experience. And of course, as a composer, of course you start to, make things up in your head about what you could do if you had the possibility to write for someone who could play the cello or the violin or whatever like that. And it was quite amazing experience to see this happen.
The thing I noticed is that he could get so much volume out of the instrument because there's such a lot of force that you can bring with that bow. You'll see tonight, we'll probably play without amplification, and the sheer decibel level coming out of the instrument is pretty exciting.